Okay. Let me say my piece. Here is the birthday boy. 87 years young. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear. Happy birthday to you.
Very good. Very good.
Mandela, we're waiting for you to get seated. Distinguished guests, trustees and friends of the Nelson Mandela Foundation, ladies and gentlemen, it is my great pleasure and honor to welcome you to the third Nelson Mandela Annual Lecture. It is our extreme privilege that this coincides with yet another important event, Madiba's birthday. Yesterday, our father, our mentor, and our own homegrown legend reached another milestone. This occasion today, the third Nelson Mandela Annual Lecture, is a celebration of his life, of the immense contribution he has made to human life, its meaning as well as to freedom. Throughout his life, Madiba has shown the price of love, the price of freedom. His selflessness and compassion, his graciousness has showed us the meaning of life as we know it in South Africa, that life is about giving in the extreme. Because of him, we have rediscovered the essence of our life in South Africa, as I indicated. Inspired by him, as South Africans and Africans, we have begun our march into the future with an ever-present confidence. Madiba, as we come together to wish you happy birthday today, we would like to use this opportunity in some small measure to thank you for everything you are, for everything you have been, and everything you will always be to us. Ladies and gentlemen, amongst our distinguished guests, we have the former President of the United States, Mr. Bill Clinton. He needs no introduction. He's a great friend of the Nelson Mandela Foundation, and he delivered the inaugural address in 2003 of the Nelson Mandela Lectures. A man who brought new ideas to our present age and strove to achieve peace and justice in the world, and is now a later-day AIDS activist. Welcome. It is also my great pleasure, ladies and gentlemen, to bring to your attention the newly married Archbishop Desmond Tutu. We are particularly privileged, Archbishop, that you would cut short your honeymoon, I believe it was on the Rovers Rail, to be with us today. Dear Arch, welcome. The Archbishop is well known to all of us. As a result of his sterling work in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, we in South Africa see in him a reflection of truth. We see in him a reflection of reconciliation. Our second Nobel laureate, Archbishop Tutu. The two distinguished gentlemen here represent part of Madiba's circle of friends, comrades, and companions. We're very privileged to share this important event with them. I've thought very hard about what it is that is common amongst all three of them. Apart from their philosophy, their love for freedom, I have found this embodied in a statement once made by Bill Clinton, and I'd like to quote, in brackets, "The presidency has taught me a great deal. It has taught me the importance of being humble. I've had to ask for forgiveness in a public way, in a way many people would not do, although everybody at some point does so in private. But it has also taught me to be less aggravated at other people, less agitated, less upset about some criticism I get. I've learned a lot about giving up a little so that I can look at the bigger things." This is what Madiba has been saying to us over and over. The art of forgiving and being forgiven, and the humility that goes with it. This is what Archbishop Tutu also represents. So, ladies and gentlemen, not only are we in the presence of greatness, we are in the presence of great humility. My privilege today ends on a very high note because I'd like to welcome a woman I admire most, Mrs. Greta Machel. She stands for what all of us women would like to be ultimately. She stands for what I would like to be every day of my life. Internationally, she's the face of African women, whom she represents with dignity, passion, and integrity. And she's internationally recognized for her outstanding humanitarian work involving children and women. She needs no introduction, but deserves our special acknowledgement both in her own right and as our mother. Ladies and gentlemen, Mrs. Machel. Here ends my role, sadly. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome again. And now I'd like to hand over to John Samuel. I thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the third annual Nelson Mandela Lecture. Before I tell you a little bit about the lecture, its purpose, and its scope, it is my privilege to introduce to you Professor Jake Schervel, the chair of the Nelson Mandela Foundation, Dr. Ramphele, a trustee, Mr. Ngumalo, the business director and of SAP Africa and a co-sponsor of the Nelson Mandela Lecture. The Nelson Mandela Lecture was initiated to provide a public platform for distinguished individuals who would engage with the challenging issues that confront our society and the world. The Nelson Mandela Lecture builds on the notion of dialogue, an idea given full meaning in this country and through the leadership of Mr. Nelson Mandela. Central to this notion is the principle of an active and critical public dialogue that will strengthen democracy. The Nelson Mandela Foundation attempts through these lectures to harness information and communication technology to make this public dialogue inclusive. This evening, through our public broadcaster, the SABC, we are reaching over 40 African countries. It will also be carried on the internet. Next year, we plan to reach 10 African university campuses and network as many other South African universities as well. So next year, this lecture will reach an even larger audience, and in this way contributing in a significant fashion to a Pan-African dialogue. Once again, welcome to the Nelson Mandela Annual Lecture. And now I call upon Professor Jakes Gerwel, the chairperson of the Nelson Mandela Foundation, to introduce the Nelson Mandela Foundation to you and to introduce our distinguished speaker for this evening, Professor Wangari Maathai.
Thanks, John. Madiba, Gracia, our two previous Nelson Mandela lecturers, President Clinton and Archbishop Tutu, the trustees of the Nelson Mandela Foundation, of the Nelson Mandela Children's Fund, of the Mandela Rhodes Foundation, and of the Nelson Mandela Museum, members of the family, excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. My task, as John said tonight, is to very briefly introduce you to the Nelson Mandela Foundation and, more importantly, to our third Nelson Mandela Annual Lecturer, Nobel Laureate Professor Maathai. Before doing those two very pleasurable tasks, I'm sure that everybody present will indulge me in first saying to Madiba, on behalf of the trustees of the Nelson Mandela Foundation, its management and staff, and everybody associated with the foundation, a very happy birthday, Madiba. I know that the Children's Fund will be having its celebrations tomorrow and will speak for themselves, but do allow me, though, to also bring greetings from the Mandela Rhodes Foundation and the Nelson Mandela Museum. You honor us all, Madiba, through our association with you and your name. We wish you peace and much happiness. I'm certain that there would not be many people in this gathering who do not know about the Nelson Mandela Foundation, so let me therefore be very, very brief in the introduction of the foundation. The Nelson Mandela Foundation was established in 1999, immediately after Mr. Mandela's retirement from the South African presidency. Although he had formally retired, his agenda was as full as when he was president, if not fuller. Hence, there was a need for an institutional base to provide him with logistical, administrative, and research support, and the foundation arose directly from this need or those needs. The vision of the Nelson Mandela Foundation is to, in collaboration with its sister institutions, the Children's Fund, the Mandela Rhodes Foundation, as I say, the Mandela Museum, to harness the legacy of Mr. Mandela to address some of the urgent challenges of our century. The Foundation's program work focuses on two central themes that run consistently through Madiba's life. The first is the expansion of human freedoms, and the second is the continued development of human potential. The Foundation brings these themes to life by promoting dialogue, by improving our understanding of critical issues and promoting research, and by demonstrating possibilities by working with innovative projects and partnerships. The mission of the Foundation, briefly: firstly, as an African-rooted organization, the Foundation seeks to make a global impact through helping to promote the Mandela legacy. In an approach that integrates knowledge and practice, the Foundation seeks to develop initiatives that advance our understanding of social change and human development. And by focusing on democracy, freedom, and human fulfillment, the Foundation will use and create critical dialogue opportunities to express those values. And this annual lecture series falls squarely within that mission, and we are very happy about your presence here. And now, proudly, my privilege too to introduce to you our third Nelson Mandela Annual Lecturer, Professor Wangari Maathai. She was born in Nyeri in 1940, and she was able to pursue higher education, which was a rarity for girls in rural areas of Kenya. She earned a biology degree from Mount St. Scholastica College in Kansas and a master's degree at the University of Pittsburgh. When she returned to Kenya, she worked in veterinary medicine research at the University of Nairobi and earned a PhD there. She worked her way up through the academic ranks, becoming head of the veterinary medicine faculty and the first for a woman at any department at that university. In 1997, she ran for the presidency of Kenya, though the party withdrew her candidacy a few days before the elections without letting her know, and she was defeated for a seat in parliament in the same election. In 1998, she gained worldwide attention through her stand when the Kenyan president backed development of a luxury housing project, and building began by clearing hundreds of acres of Kenyan forest. In 1991, she was arrested and imprisoned, and an Amnesty International letter-writing campaign helped free her. In January 2002, she accepted a position as visiting fellow at Yale University's Global Institute for Sustainable Forestry. And in December 2002, she was elected to Parliament. She was named Deputy Minister in the Ministry of Environment, Natural Resources and Wildlife in 2003. In 2004, she was, as you all know, awarded the coveted Nobel Peace Prize. And before I ask her to honor us by addressing us this evening, a very short 2-minute video to give a better profile than I could do. But to say thank you very much, Professor Maathai, for honoring us with your presence at this lecture. Thank you.
Born April 1st, 1940 in Nyeri, Kenya, is a Kenyan environmentalist, an activist, feminist, mother, educator, a hero, and a healer.
My life has not been a long struggle. I haven't struggled in life. Most of my life I was a happy growing child.
After her long and decorated educational history, which includes a bachelor's degree in biology, a master's degree, and after returning to Kenya, she earned a PhD in veterinary medicine. In 1971, she became professor of veterinary anatomy.
Being a child of farmers, I knew that the soil is our life.
As a member of the National Council of Women of Kenya in the 1970s, Professor Maathai initiated the Green Belt Movement, a grassroots organization primarily carried out by the women of Kenya, who through protecting their environment and through the paid employment of planting trees, assist them to better care for their families.
I want to appeal to all people in this country who live near the forest. Protect your forest. It's your life.
What started as a very small movement has led to the establishment of some 600 tree nurseries, has gotten thousands of women involved, and over 30 million trees planted.
When we plant trees, we plant seeds of hope. And we think of ourselves as people who are giving people hope where there could be a lot of hopelessness.
In being the first African woman to receive the 2004 Nobel Peace Prize Award, it is an indication that her message of environmental restoration, poverty eradication, and world peace are inseparable, has gone beyond the borders of Kenya and reached the world over.
Being being recognized, it is this country that we love so much, that we have worked for so much, that is being recognized. The Kenyans who have committed themselves to the protection of the environment. It's also honoring Africans, and especially the African women.
Professor Maathai's greatest gift to the people of Kenya, and more so to the women of Kenya, is by inspiring an internal shift in thinking that has led them to share their feelings of powerlessness. She has brought hope and courage back into their lives. They too have the power to rewrite the future of Kenya. At 65, Professor Wangari Maathai continues to dream in green.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Your Excellencies, President Nelson Mandela and Bill Clinton, Your Grace, the Archbishop Desmond Tutu, High Excellency Graça Machel, Ministers, Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Allow me to thank the Nelson Mandela Foundation for inviting me to share these unforgettable days with South Africa. It is both a privilege and an honor to be in your midst and to give this year's Nelson Mandela Lecture. This is a very special time when we are celebrating Madiba's birthday. Madiba, you are a source of great joy and pride for all of us in Africa and indeed the whole world. Thank you for your dedication and commitment for the cause of freedom and human dignity. We thank you, and we thank God for the gift that is Nelson Mandela. We salute you, Madiba. We love you, and we shall remain forever grateful to you. It is a privilege to be here today, to be able to say happy birthday, and may you have many more. I'm very aware of the extraordinary speakers of previous Mandela lectures. Both President Bill Clinton and Archbishop Desmond Tutu have set very high standards for these lectures. I'm deeply honored to share this platform with them. In the last few weeks, the world and G8 leaders have focused on Africa. In Green Eagles, Scotland, G8 leaders were joined by African statesmen, among them President Thabo Mbeki of South Africa, Olusegun Obasanjo of Nigeria, Benjamin Mkapa of Tanzania, and Prime Minister Meles Zenawi of Ethiopia. Leading up to the G8 meeting, another global campaign was picking up, Live 8. Inspired by Gedolf, Bono, and other artists concerned around the world, the concerts were organized in support of Africa, attracting millions of ordinary citizens in industrialized countries. They went to enjoy the music, but they also went to be informed and educated about Africa. They used that forum to express their support for Africa. The G8 leaders listened and watched as their citizens gathered to support the call to make dehumanizing poverty unacceptable. But even as I appreciated and was encouraged by the efforts at Green Eagles and around the world, I had some concerns. This is because I knew that the G8 leaders had their own concerns and constraints. I also knew that they had some doubts about leadership and governance in Africa. They were therefore unlikely to, for example, cancel all the unpayable debts. Excuse me. Yet they knew that in some countries like Kenya, essential services are being denied citizens so that debt obligations can be met. In other countries, the average income used to determine eligibility for debt cancellation is misleading. This is because of inequitable distribution of resources, which has created large disparities between the very few rich and the very many citizens who are poor. When such countries are denied debt relief, it is the many poor who suffer and who are punished. The G8 leaders had their reasons for their doubts. It was reported that some of these reasons included the fact that some African governments do not respect the rule of law and human rights, that some leaders are corrupt and often siphon the same money into personal accounts, that some governments spend funds inefficiently and excessively. It is important to realize, however, that those who may be guilty do not suffer. It is the poor who suffer. Despite the challenges, there has been much progress in Africa. There are already good indications of good governance in many countries in Africa. In many others, civil society continues to grow with moral support from governments and the African Union. For example, the African Union is currently overseeing the formation of a civil society organ called ECOSOC to advise it on issues related to the African people and to ensure that they participate in the affairs of the Union. I have the honor and the privilege to preside over this process, and I consider it an important window of opportunity. Further, many countries in the region are resolving their conflicts and are working for peace and stability. For sure, there remains much to be done, but it is important for us to appreciate and encourage those who are making bold decisions. Nevertheless, as I stated earlier, it is the ordinary citizens who suffer when debts are not cancelled, when financial assistance is not forthcoming, or when trade barriers are raised. It is on their behalf that the African leaders traveled to Glen Eagles to meet G8 leaders. It is on their behalf that the Live 8 concerts were held. It is for them that the Jubilee 2000 campaign was carried out by global citizens. Yet many ordinary citizens in Africa had no idea that such discussions and concerts were taking place on their behalf. I wonder how many consultations and concerts will be held before a sustainable solution is found, not only by the G8 leaders, but also by the African leadership and the African people. What will it take for a solution to be found? I ask these questions because the poor people the world is concerned about come from Africa, which is one of the richest continents on the planet. It is endowed with a large number of men and women. It has lots of sunshine, oil, precious stones, forests, water, wildlife, soil, land, agricultural products. So what's wrong? What is the problem? Why are the people of Africa so poor? The problem, I think, is that many Africans lack knowledge, skills, and tools to create wealth from their resources. They are unable to add value to their raw materials so that they can take processed goods into the local and international markets, and negotiate better prices and better rules of trade. Without that capacity, opportunities will continue to slip away, or others will continue to take advantage of them without the benefits reaching the people in whose name these negotiations took place. What can be done to prepare Africa so that the benefits from the concessions and opportunities that surely lie ahead can be beneficial? Now, during the last 30 years of my life, I've worked with the Greenbelt movement, and I have seen the need to give our people values. The man whose birthday we celebrate today exemplifies these values. For example, the value of service to the common good. How shall we motivate our men and women in the region willing to sacrifice and volunteer so that others may have it better? The values of commitment, of persistence, of patience, to stay with your vision until the goal is realized. Then there is the love for the land and a desire to protect it from desertification and other destructive processes. Perhaps it is due to lack of information and ignorance, or perhaps it is due to poverty, but we need people who love Africa so much that they want to protect her from destructive processes. Some that are threatening the entire continent include desertification due to deforestation, encroachment into forests for subsistence farming, overgrazing, and loss of biodiversity and soil. Of particular importance in this is for Africa and for the whole world indeed, is the protection of the Congo Basin forest ecosystem. These two values are important to African leaders who should govern and serve for the benefit of the people rather than themselves. Working at the grassroots level and with the poor people, it was depressing to me to see those in power fail to provide necessary services and protect the land. Instead, they facilitated the exploitation of the people and their resources. Because I have experienced irresponsible governance in the course of my work for the environment, it is difficult to dismiss the reservations and the concerns expressed by the G8 leaders. Another value we must espouse is the love and concern for the youth. One of the most devastating experiences at the grassroots level today is to see the youth wasting away because they are unemployed, even after they have completed secondary and tertiary education. Governments should prioritize the youth and their health. This should involve investments in technical education, HIV and AIDS prevention, treatment, and care support programs. One of the constraints, even for the government, is that we have not invested enough in education, and as I said, especially in technical education. Technical education would give citizens knowledge, skills, and experience, which would make them competent, confident, and competitive. Such personnel would create opportunities of entrepreneurship and wealth creation. Such investments in Asia have contributed significantly to the economic growth and alleviation of poverty in that region. Without skills, people will always find themselves locked out of productive, rewarding economic activities that would give them a better share of their national wealth. They find themselves unemployed, all underemployed, and they are certainly underpaid. They may wish to secure a well-paid job, but if they do not have skills and tools, nobody will hire them. Consequently, they will not be able to meet their needs for housing, health care, nutrition, and other family and personal needs. They get trapped in a vicious cycle of poverty and sometimes crime. Besides these values, Africa needs to prepare herself by deliberately working for peace and security. I believe much of the poverty in Africa has been fueled by conflicts. In the course of my work, I learned that whether it is at the national or regional level, most conflicts between communities are over resources. Who will access them? Who will control and utilize them? Who will be included? Who will be excluded? Often, those in power invent excuses to justify the exclusion and other injustices against those perceived to be weak and vulnerable. But when resources are scarce, so degraded that they can no longer sustain livelihoods, or when they are not equitably distributed, conflicts will invariably ensue. Equitable distribution of resources cannot be effected unless there is democratic space, which respects the rule of law and human rights. Such democratic space gives citizens an enabling environment to be creative and productive. What is clear is that there is a close linkage between sustainable management of resources and equitable distribution of the same, on one hand, and good governance and peace on the other. These are the pillars of any stable and secure state. Such a state has the enabling environment for development. People who are denied these pillars eventually become angry and frustrated, and they undermine peace and security, either in their neighborhoods or beyond. For that reason, we need to manage our resources sustainably, accountably, and responsibly. We need to share these resources equitably. Otherwise, we shall continue to invest in wars and conflicts, fighting crime and domestic instability, rather than promoting development and thereby eliminating poverty. Over the past 30 years of work in Kenya, I discovered something that is still not very clear to me. It is perhaps the most unrecognized problem in Africa today, especially at the grassroots level. It is the level of disempowerment of our people. Wherever it comes from, it manifests itself in the form of fear, lack of confidence, low self-esteem, apathy, and lack of enthusiasm to take charge of one's life and destiny. To the disempowered, it seems much easier and acceptable to live their lives completely in the hands of third parties, especially governments. At the Greenbelt movement, to assist community members understand the need to take charge of their destiny and overcome apathy, we initiated education seminars to identify problems, their sources, and solutions. This became a process of self-discovery and self-empowerment. It would take a long time, but eventually participants believed in themselves and became more independent and self-reliant. They embraced some of the values I've mentioned above, and they developed a deep desire to better themselves and their immediate environments. Eventually, they were even willing to work for the common resources like forests and public parks. For Africa to benefit from the opportunities which come her way, she must empower her people. Education will help. Peace and security are important, and sustainable management of resources is essential. But the people must be allowed to gain confidence, dignity, and a sense of self-worth. Ultimately, they must also be empowered with knowledge, skills, and tools so that they can take action. This is why debt relief is very important. It allows governments additional resources to invest in initiatives that empower their people. The phenomenon of disempowerment is very common, and perhaps that is why it is not addressed. But I believe that it is one of the main reasons why so many people are unable to take advantage of the many opportunities available in Africa today. Such disempowerment and the triumph over it reminds me of a story in the Bible which I like and which I want to share with you. Your Grace, it is to be found in the Bible, Acts 3, verse 1 to 10. It is the story where Peter and John went to the temple for prayer. As they approached, they came across a beggar who was crippled since birth. The beggar must have had all the characteristics of a disempowered person: poor, self-effacing, dejected, low self-esteem, no self-pride, and no sense of well-being. After all, he was a cripple. He did not even dare to look up to the people from whom he was begging. He was too ashamed of his status. The Bible says that he bowed his head, hid his face, and stretched his hands for alms. Peter and John, upon seeing him in that dehumanized and humiliated state, said to him, "Look up!" That must have been a bit startling, because people did not usually talk to him. Peter went on, "Silver and gold we do not have, but what we have we give to you." And taking him by the right hand, Peter helped the lame man stand up, saying, "In the name of Jesus Christ of Nazareth, rise up and walk." And much to his surprise, he felt his limbs get strong, and he rose up and walked forward with confidence and pride. The Bible says he went with Peter and John into the temple, jumping and praising God. He was an empowered man, no longer a beggar, no longer dehumanized. Now he could go and take care of himself with dignity, self-respect, and confidence. There must have been many worshippers who had given him a few coins many times, but never thought of doing anything different. But Peter and John reacted differently and decided to empower him, to give him wholeness. They encouraged him to believe in himself and walk with them into the temple. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, friends and leaders of Africa should be like Peter and John. They should strive to empower Africa and not only give them arms, give her arms. African governments should be responsible and accountable to their people, lifting them from ignorance, diseases, and poverty, which cripple them. In closing, we must remember that Peter and John called on the beggar to rise up and walk. It was not Peter and John who had to do the rising and the walking. It was the beggar. On his part, the beggar made a choice to respond to the call. He could have preferred to stay put and continue to beg the rich worshippers. But he decided to respond to an opportunity which presented itself. He was ready for it, and his life was changed forever and for better. With African leaders like these here today, President Nelson Mandela, Archbishop Desmond Tutu, and many friends like President Bill Clinton, we have the Peters and the Johns we need. They call on all of us to rise up and walk. Walk away from ignorance, inertia, apathy, and fatalism. Walk towards the temple of economic and political freedom, an Africa free of dehumanizing poverty. There are simple actions we can take as individuals. I want to encourage you to start by planting trees, 10 trees. Recently, I learned in Japan that each one of us needs 10 trees to take care of the carbon dioxide we exhale. So make sure you know where your 10 trees are. Practice the 3R campaign, which stands for reduce, reuse, repair, and reuse resources, which is in Japan, we call it Motainai. And it is a campaign going on in Japan in a big way to use resources with respect, remembering that there are others who will come after us. Get involved in local initiatives. Be a volunteer in your community. Serve your community. For governments, prioritize technical schools and give people knowledge and skills for self-employment. I could go on, but I'm sure you all can think of individual initiatives that you can work on. For tonight, Madiba, I know this is the dream you have for Africa, an Africa free of dehumanizing poverty, an Africa with economic and political freedom. So, my fellow Africans, listen to the call of Madiba. Rise up and walk.